Week 8 is on the horizon, and we are breaking down the biggest waiver wire additions, the must-adds to help out your battered fantasy football teams. A lot of injuries happen this week in fantasy football, but hopefully we can patchwork that specifically at the wide receiver position. So this is going to be the structure of today's video. I'm going to go through my top 10 waiver adds, specifically for like 12-team leagues and most common league formats. At the end, I'll rattle off a couple shallow league adds for those of you guys that play in 8 and 10-man leagues. Don't want to leave you out. Some guys that are like 40 to 70% rostered that you might be willing to pick up. And then I'll go through some really deep league adds for those of you psychos that play in 14 and 16-man leagues as well. So let's get right into the top 10 waiver adds for regular, bog standard 12-man leagues, starting with my number 10, which is Jonnu Smith, tight end of the Miami Dolphins. Monster usage in week 5 and in week 7. You can see there 24% and 32% of the Dolphins targets respectively. Tua Tagovailoa has been officially designated to return from IR and probably on pace to start in week 8. Nobody has been good in this offense since Tua went down in week 2. Tyreek's been useless. Jalen Waddle's been useless. Devon Achane hasn't been as good as well. Jonnu Smith is likely a streaming tight end at best, but if you are looking for some tight end production this week specifically, you could probably fire Jonnu Smith out there because he's starting to get the routes, he's starting to get the usage, and his targets are, catching up with how he's been playing as of late. So if you're looking for a tight end, Jonnu Smith could be a decent option if Cade Otton is not available, who I'll talk about later on in the video. My number 9 waiver addition, and unfortunately this is not a good week to need running backs, it is mainly wide receiver heavy in my top 10 here, is Kendre Miller, running back of the New Orleans Saints. I think he's just a good stash right now. Alvin Kamara is dealing with, rib injuries and hip injuries and, foot injuries. Like, he has like a million injuries right now. He's also like 28, 29 years old, has a number of touches under his belt. He's old. He's banged up right now. I know the Saints are a complete tire fire train wreck operation, but Derek Carr is probably going to be back in the next 2 to 3 games. Kendre Miller played 33% of the snaps in his debut on Thursday Night Football. Looked pretty decent as well when he got opportunities. So if you're looking for a stash, handcuff, maybe has some standalone upside. But again, when you're factoring in handcuffs, you want to factor in how likely are they to actually be starters, because how likely is the starter ahead of them to get injured. And Kamara would be right up there with the top running back likelihoods to get injured in the league because of his age and because of his touches. So Kendre Miller to me is a very good stash. If you guys are holding some random second tight end or second quarterback, just drop him and go pick up Kendre Miller instead, because the upside for a workload is definitely there should anything happen to Kamara. Number 8 waiver ad on the slate here for me is Drake Maye. If you guys are looking for quarterback help, he is the only quarterback in my top 10. Been over 20 points per game in both of his starts so far. He's run 8 times in his last 2 starts as well, so you're getting a little bit of a rushing upside there, and the Patriots have trusted him, despite him being a rookie quarterback, to drop back and pass the football. He had 42 dropbacks in both of his starts so far, which was more than any of Jacoby Brissett's starts. So they're actually trusting Drake Maye to drop back and throw the football. He does have a tough schedule coming up against the Jets this week, the Titans, and the Bears the next 3 games. I do think he is definitely streamable even this week against the Jets. Maybe not the best streaming option because of the upcoming schedule, but I feel really good about Drake Maye's ability to just continue to get better, continue to run, continue to play at a pretty high level. And again, even despite the tough matchup against Houston 2 weeks ago, in his first NFL game, he was able to produce over 20 PPR points. So I feel pretty good about Drake Maye as a streaming quarterback, even in a tough matchup against the Jets. Number 7 waiver addition for me is Roschon Johnson, likely dropped in a lot of leagues for people who had him on bye last week. DeAndre Swift has had his fair share of injuries, and very similar to the Kendre Miller edition, and all of the running backs I really talk about on here are going to be mostly contingent upside plays. DeAndre Swift is inconsistent. He's dealt with injuries in the past. Roschon Johnson is big. He's physical. He can catch the football. He's been efficient when he's gotten opportunities, and he has a minor standalone role on the goal line and kind of in the receiving game. So if you absolutely had to start somebody, you probably could roll with Roschon Johnson. I think the reason you'd be holding him, though, is he's a stash in case DeAndre Swift goes down. The Bears are a 4-2 football team right now, starting to turn the corner as an offense, and I think their handcuff running back has a lot more value than a lot of people probably think. Next up, we have my number 6 waiver wire addition. That is Ray Davis, running back of the Buffalo Bills, my highest rated running back of the group that we're going to talk about today. Every one of my top 5 guys are wide receivers. He played a bigger role in week 7, but again, you're probably not throwing Ray Davis out there unless you have a James Cook injury, and James Cook currently is already banged up with the turf toe injury. It looks like he's been limited as far as his workload is concerned and his efficiency is concerned. So in week 6, when James Cook was out of the game, we saw what Ray Davis could do with the handcuff upside. He was a top 11 running back. back, which shows that he can be the guy, which shows that he is efficient. He is a productive dude. It makes him one of the better handcuffs in fantasy football because he is a good stash on a great offense that likes to run the football, and he's a good player, a talented player, clearly. So definitely go with stash Ray Davis if you have an empty bench spot, or maybe you lost a player and you had some replacements on the bench. Definitely Ray Davis is one of the better stashes at running back in fantasy. Now let's get into the top 5 of this list here. I think with all of these guys, you're looking for wide receiver help, specifically this week where people lost Brandon Ayuk, they lost DK Metcalf, they lost Chris Godwin. There's a lot of wide receiver injuries that happened this week, so a lot of people are probably going to be going to the waiver wire to look for immediate production. Dontayvion Wicks, who's rostered right now in 34% of leagues, he's like a 5 to 15% of the fab budget type of ad for me. Ultimate better and best ball guy, admittedly. It's hard to figure out when you want to start Dontayvion Wicks, but it doesn't mean he should be on the waiver wire. He should be rostered in pretty much every league. He is a triple wide receiver handcuff. As we know, if Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, or Romeo Doubs miss any time, Dontayvion Wicks is a guy that we can feel comfortable projecting as a top 40-ish play on any given week. Last week, he only ran 46% of the routes, but he was coming off of that AC sprain. He was questionable coming into the game. All of us thought he would be missing 1 to 2 games at the very least. Wouldn't go crazy on him as far as fab budget is concerned because he is still part of this 4 wide receiver committee, but he just absolutely has to be rostered because he has a lot of upside to offer a starting lineup if he ever gets in there as the starting wide receiver. He has commanded 35% targets per route run on the season for Jordan Love, and Jordan Love is playing at a pretty high level, and he's also slinging the ball like crazy, kind of not willing to play it conservative. He's willing to take chances, and Dontayvion Wicks is a good fit for that kind of play style. My number 4 waiver addition on the slate here is Troy Franklin, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are a little bit of a dumpster fire, but Franklin has been a little bit of a bright spot the last couple of games. 2 games of solid usage now. He was nearly missed for a long touchdown on that play that everybody, had cycled around Twitter where Bo Nix threw like a hole shot in between 2 of his players. Troy Franklin was wide open for a long touchdown on that play. And if he catches a long touchdown, in addition to the other 25% of the targets that he saw in the game against the Saints on Thursday Night Football, we might be talking about Troy Franklin as the best waiver addition on this slate. The Broncos play the Panthers and the Ravens the next 2 games. Very exploitable matchups. I'm sure there are better options for those of you guys that need a replacement for Godwin or for Metcalf and something like that. But I do think if you just needed a spot start for a bye week or for a guy that's going to be out for a game or 2, I do think Troy Franklin's a decent play for the next 2 weeks. Franklin has looked like a rookie wide receiver at times. He's had drops. He's had plays where he doesn't all the way look like he knows what he's doing. But again, he played with Bo Nix in college. Those guys have a chemistry built up together. And we've seen that so far when he's been on the field. Since Josh Reynolds has been put on IR, he's been over 65% of the routes, and he's been commanding targets and scored over 10 PPR points per game in back-to-back weeks. So Troy Franklin hasn't had like a big boom breakout performance yet, but I do think it could be coming this week against the Carolina Panthers, and I want to get ahead of that. So moving on to the next waiver addition we're talking about here, Cedric Tillman is my number 3 ad, very widely available in a lot of leagues. He took over the Amari Cooper role this past week. We saw with no more Deshaun Watson, this offense actually looked better, which I think is not really that shocking to a lot of us that have seen Deshaun Watson play football in the last 2 years. Jameis Winston is probably going to be the starter going forward. We don't know if DTR is going to start or if Jameis is going to start. I would imagine it's going to be Jameis, but we'll have to wait and see on that. If it is Jameis Winston, Cedric Tillman, contested catch wide receiver, big physical guy, profiles very similarly to a receiver that Jameis Winston was very comfortable throwing to in Mike Evans in Tampa Bay. As Nick Chubb ramps up, this offense could get a little bit better. And again, I think Jameis Winston's probably a better quarterback at this point in time than Deshaun Watson. So I actually think they might be able to move the offense better. 24% of the team's targets for Cedric Tillman this past week, 12 targets, 127 air yards, led the team with 81 receiving yards. He is a viable wide receiver 4 flex play going forward, in my opinion. If you are in need of long-term help at wide receiver because you lost Godwin or you lost Brandon Ayuk, who are out for the season, presumably, you are in luck. At least Cedric Tillman should be a guy that you could throw in there as a good flex player or whatever the case is. So even though David Njoku's going to be the number 1 here, I think Jerry Jeudy versus Cedric Tillman's kind of a toss-up. Cedric Tillman could definitely be the number 1 over Jerry Jeudy. I liked him as a prospect. He kind of reminded me of like a Cortland Sutton or one of these big physical guys that can win at the catch point, Corey Davis type of wide receiver. And I think that meshes well with Jameis Winston, so he's a good option this week. Number 2, speaking of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is Jalen McMillan. And this pains me to say, and I will take my L right now because I said on the live streams yesterday that I thought the Baltimore Ravens were going to lose to the Buccaneers. It started out great. Mike Evans tears his hamstring up, and he is probably going to be out for a couple of games. And then it all went downhill from there. Derrick Henry runs all over us. Lamar Jackson Jackson looks like the MVP. Not great. And then in the last 2 minutes of the game, Chris Godwin dislocates his ankle. So now we have Godwin probably out for the season. We have Mike Evans probably out for a couple of games, I would imagine. The Bucs bye week is in 3 weeks. I think the target return date for Mike Evans is probably after the bye. Maybe he'll be back on the field before then. He's an absolute warrior and he plays through worse. So it's possible. But at the same time, Jalen McMillan is going to be the guy that I think takes the biggest step in this wide receiver core. When you stack up Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan, and Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, number one, profiles closely to Chris Godwin in that he's going to play that slot role that Baker Mayfield has really liked. And he's the most talented of the guys that I've talked about already. Jalen McMillan was a top 11 receiver in the 2024 NFL draft for me. I thought he was a very talented player, but McMillan is also getting pretty good usage in relief of Chris Godwin last week, where we saw Mike Evans go out of the game. We saw Chris Godwin go out late. The ceiling play for those of you guys that are weak at wide receiver and in need of long-term projection for a guy that can be relevant all season long is Jalen McMillan for sure. He commanded some targets on Monday night, 26% targets per route run. We saw back in week 1, he had a pretty solid performance, had a little bit of up and down, looking like a rookie type of energy to him, but I do think he has some ability to command some targets going forward for Baker Mayfield, who's still playing at a pretty high level. Didn't have a great game last night, but we've seen these games where Baker has played really well, and I think that's not really going to change even with Chris Godwin out. I still think Baker is a good enough quarterback that he can elevate the play of a guy like Jalen McMillan, get him up to speed, and I don't think Mike Evans will be out for the whole season. I think he'll probably be out a game or two, maybe 3 games, and then we should be back on track as an offense, and Jalen McMillan can be a big-time part of that as we get down the stretch of the season. So my number one waiver addition, this should come probably to no surprise of anybody, but both 49ers wide receivers, Ricky Pearsall and Jauan Jennings, are going to be huge beneficiaries of the Brandon Ayuk injury and now the Deebo Samuel in the hospital with pneumonia. So looking at Ricky Pearsall, to me, he's the better option of the two because he profiles as more so he's going to play the X receiver role that Brandon Ayuk is playing, where he beats the man coverage. He's the one who makes the downfield plays. And I just think he's a better player than Jauan Jennings because Jennings, kind of a journeyman number 3 receiver most of his career. Ricky Pearsall was a first-round pick, very talented prospect. So I like Ricky Pearsall more of the two, but I think in the short term, Jauan Jennings might be the more productive of the two guys. But Ricky Pearsall, great usage in his first game coming off of the shooting incident that he saw early in the offseason. 88% of the routes, 16% of the team's targets. Again, Jennings might throw a wrench in how productive he is right away, but I do like Ricky Pearsall as the long-term play here. I'd be willing to spend 20, 30, 40% of my fab budget on Ricky Pearsall, maybe more if you're really desperate for a wide receiver. And same goes for Jauan Jennings. If you need short-term wide receiver help, ergo you have Mike Evans or DK Metcalf, who expect to be out for the next 2 to 3 games, I think Jauan Jennings might be actually the better option of the two of these guys because I think he could be productive right away for the 49ers. So if you're interested in those guys, definitely go and add them. For those of you guys that are in shallow leagues, I will give you a couple shouts here. Any of these guys that are rostered between 40 and 70%, if you're in a 12-man league, it's very unlikely these guys would be available, but 8 and 10-man leagues, these guys might be on the wire for you. So any of these top 4 names would be my number 1 or my number 2 behind Pearsall and Jauan Jennings. Tyrone Tracy led the Giants with a 67% snap share despite Devin Singletary coming back. Also ran 68% of the routes for the team as well. So if you are in need of running backs, Tracy is the premier guy available. Again, he is very, very highly rostered, so 8 and 10-man leagues probably only. Romeo Doubs led the Packers with 10 targets, over 17.5 PPR points in back-to-back weeks. He is the premier wide receiver outside of Pearsall and Jennings. Alexander Mattison, also very high-end running back available if he is there for you, 63% rostered, at least 18 opportunities in 3 straight games, 26 this past week, even despite Zamir White coming back from injury. Keon Coleman, also available in about half of leagues, around fantasy football landscapes. 7 targets, 4 catches, 125 yards, and a near touchdown in week 7. I think Amari Cooper could open up this offense and make them pass more, so I like Keon Coleman to have a little bit better of a performance. And then some other guys that are more than 50% roster, but not quite as good of ads as the other guys there. I think these guys would be top 5 ads for me if they were available. Jalen Warren played 51% of the Steelers snaps. The run game is definitely more valuable now with Russell Wilson in there. And he's also a high-end handcuff to Najee Harris, as we know, with a standalone role. Cade Otton, if you're looking for a tight end, definitely the best option available. Over 100 yards, 10 targets versus Baltimore. Evans and Godwin are going to be out for, indeterminate amount of time. Godwin probably for the season. Evans for the next couple of games. And if you guys need a tight end, I think Cade Otton is the best guy for you. And for those of you guys that are in deeper leagues, so some of the guys that I talked about maybe aren't available and you just have an empty bench spot, some of these guys I think are good stashes for those of you guys that have deep benches. Javon Baker has yet to be activated for the Patriots, but Jalen Polk is struggling. Some of the other Patriots wide receivers are struggling, and Javon Baker was a high upside prospect. So if you want to get ahead of a potential waiver addition on him, I think he's a good stash. Audric Estime, very similar to Kendre Miller, where we saw a little glimpse of him on Thursday night. Looked pretty good. He's the Javonte Williams handcuff as of right now, and he flashed some ability, so definitely stash him if you need some running back upside. Keaton Mitchell, same thing. He's been on PUP all season long coming off of a torn ACL, but Derrick Henry's old. So if Derrick Henry starts to miss some time down the stretch, Keaton Mitchell could be a guy that has a high upside role in a very, very good offense with Baltimore. And Marshawn Lloyd's kind of the same thing, where he's been on IR since week 2 with an ankle injury that he suffered against the Colts in that game. Drafted in round 3, high upside prospect. He's the handcuff to Josh Jacobs. A.J. Dillon is out for the season. So I think Marshawn Lloyd also a decent stash for those of you guys in deeper leagues. So if I helped you guys pick up some players, leave me a like down below, comment down below any of your thoughts. I'll try and get to as many as I can. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here as well. And if you want my updated rest of season rankings, access to our trade value chart, our dynasty trade value charts, which are going through a big time update today, and our dynasty rankings as well, head on over to flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up. You can get 7 days for free, 30% off any of the packages. You can also sign up annually to get 6 months for free and a free team review from me or from Danny, either for your redraft team or for your dynasty teams. We can give you guys a team review, give you some direction. Should you rebuild? Should you tear it down? Where are you at in your redraft league? That is available. You get a free voucher for that when you sign up annually on flockfantasy.com. And trust me, there's way more than just team reviews that you get with that. All of our rankings are always up to date, rest of season, weekly, and dynasty. And then also too, you get all of our posts, you get bonus content, you get access to our prospect models, you get access to the trade calculator, our trade value charts. There's tons of bonus content. That is just from us. You also get all the bonus content of Mason over at Flock Fantasy, Avery and Nathan from the Domain, and Zach and Badake from Fantasyland. We've teamed up to give you guys a great product. So if you are interested in supporting us over there, the link will be down below in the pinned comment. And as always, sponsor for this show is Underdog Fantasy. If you want to sign up over there using code FSE, you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a special pick'em. We are going to be firing out some picks for Thursday Night Football, so stay tuned to the YouTube channel and my TikTok. That is linked down below in the description of this video as well. So with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.